Now, I've talked a lot about it in my own way. We're already 20 minutes in, so much for the light, short intro. Without further ado, I've kind of wanted to give you guys my sort of Vedic perspective on this particular combination. Now we are going to be delving into our reading of Pluto, The Evolutionary Journey of the Soul by Jeffrey Wolf Green. It's in this book that we're going to see what Pluto is in the context of Mars, what Mars is in the context of Pluto, and what their interaction means in terms of the unconscious impulse and the positive channeling of that impulse in order to find success in the moving, roving waters of the soul. To get a grip, as it were, without losing the point. Now, this is Pluto in aspect to Mars. Jeffrey Wolf Green begins by saying, before we discuss the specifics of Pluto aspected to Mars, a general discussion of the connection between these two planets is in order. In traditional astrology, we have learned that Mars is a lower octave of Pluto. A lower octave is a denser expression of a higher vibration. From an evolutionary point of view, Pluto is correlated to the soul. As explained in Chapter 1, the soul has two archetypal desires, one to separate from the source of the soul, and one to return to the source. For more on this, check out the beginning videos of this series. That was Chapter 1. The source is the soul, and the desire to return to the soul is to the desire to not be an individual. However, the dual desires coexist and interact to individuate, to become the non-dual expression of not having to act, but also perpetuating the necessary yang to that yin, which is the consciousness, the awareness, the illuminating, the awakening, the being of an individuated form of that soul. The soul has two archetypal desires. One, to separate from the source of the soul. And two, to return to the source. These dual desires coexist and integrate and interact. The soul is rooted in our unconscious. How then do most of us know that the soul exists beyond the testimony of enlightened beings or spiritual teachers and their teachings? Well, we can all know that the soul exists by the simple fact that we have desires. All of us have myriad desires that dictate what we think we need, which leads to the choices that we make. These choices determine the actions that we take. Actions lead to reactions, which create new actions, and so on. Mars is the lower octave of Pluto, and thus correlates to the conscious component in our personalities that instinctively initiates or acts upon the desires originating from the soul. Mars represents the instinctive urge in all of us to act, to become, to move forward with our lives. Is it not true that we all are in a continual state of becoming at each moment in our lives? To become is to act, to be in motion. And each of us is becoming who we are as unique individuals according to karmic or action, reaction, and evolutionary laws. Sometimes we gotta act. You got to get a granola bar, you're going to eat a granola bar. And all of that is an unconscious yet conscious string of, or strand, samskara, of what you are. At some level, all that we really are, beyond it all, is what we do. These laws, these evolutionary laws of karma, evolution, reaction, etc., they're determined by our previous and as well as our current desires. If I kill someone this very moment, I may myself be killed in the very next moment. Because Mars is conscious and Pluto is unconscious, most of us feel that our desires originate at a conscious, egocentric level. My ego is in control. The fact is that all desires originate from the soul and are transmitted to the individualizing aspect in all of us, and that is Mars. Mars instinctively acts to fulfill the desires originating in the soul. This dynamic is the very basis of the Indian concept of Maya, the illusion of separateness from the universal whole or source. The classic example of the wave upon the sea will suffice to illustrate this point. If my consciousness is centered in the wave, then, from the wave's perspective, I am an egocentric individual. If my consciousness is centered in the sea, the source of the wave, then I realize I am but an individualized aspect of the sea, merely the wave. As the wave must return to the sea, so too must all of us in our evolutionary journey return to the source. Mars is the wave. Pluto, the soul, is the source of the wave. Yet Pluto, the soul, is also a wave of the ultimate source, that which created the soul, as well as everything else. Now, just as the wave will resist returning to the sea for a time because of its upward motion and momentum, I am not the ocean. Right now, look at it go. Because I am singing this one note, I am one vocal cord, and I am separate from all the others. I am. Just as the wave will resist returning to the sea for a time, I am not dead. I am not unconscious glob. I am in my upward motion and momentum. I am, just like the upward momentum of a wave. So too do all of us. We resist returning to the source that created us. Mars represents the personal, conscious, and subjective will that is centered in our personality. In the same way that you might, this person could really feel something related to their family, in the sense that you are a limb of your family, and your family's power kind of holds sway over you, but at the same time, you're also an individuated wave. Sometimes you slip into the background of the bigger picture that you're involved in, but sometimes you are, most times, the fact of all of it is that you are both. You are the background and the foreground all at once. Mars represents the personal, conscious, and subjective will, that egocentric individuation, the self, that is centered in our personality. The soul, because it contains dual desires, simultaneously correlates to the will of the source and the will to remain separated from that source. This dynamic is the basis for conflict within an individual, because this dynamic is the basis for conflict within an individual between individuals and between an individual and the source. This conflict originates in the soul and is reflected through our personalities. Our personalities are created by our souls, relative to the karmic and evolutionary laws set in motion by each of us. The karmic and evolutionary laws are in direct relationship to our prior actions and desires. Again, Pluto transmits its desires to Mars. With respect to the coexisting desires in the soul, is it not true that each of us will consciously sense that there is something more after we've obtained something that we have desired of a separate nature, of a separating nature? In a conscious way, Mars reflects the unconscious desire to separate and return. Thus, we can desire the new lover, the new position, the new possession, and so forth, yet still feel that there is more. Not satisfied, not properly getting to the Venus that Mars is supposed to feel with its action. We are dissatisfied after the temporary glow of actualizing what we have desired of a separating nature. It is this sense of dissatisfaction that consciously reflects the unconscious desire to return to the source, which would be the ultimate satisfaction. Now the point is this: the relationship of Mars to Pluto in the birth chart, the house and sign locality of each, and the aspect or phase linking them, will describe how the individual acts to implement Mars, the desires originating in the soul, Pluto. The house and sign locality of Mars represents an area in the birth chart through which many kinds of desires are manifested or transmitted in order to become, at every moment in time, who we are destined to become according to our karmic and evolutionary laws. It should be clear that free will or choice exists in the soul, relative to which desires are acted upon and which are not. Via transmission to Mars, this phenomenon of free will and choice is also reflected in our conscious personalities. Now, a simple example will illustrate these ideas. Let's put Pluto in Leo, in the 9th house, trine Mars in Sagittarius in the 2nd house. Let's assume the individual is in an individuated evolutionary state. So this is just to give us a quick little thrift on what he means by that. Earlier in the book, Jeffrey Wolf Green talks about 3 evolutionary states of consciousness evolution that people can go through. The first is the herd state, where they're unconscious and they're just being pushed around by the Plutonian unconscious forces, which they are fully unaware of in themselves and how they relate to them. It's the tamasic energy, unaware. The second state is the individuated state, which the Indian psychology would call rajas, passion, individuated. And this is what the example here is going to be, where the person has a sense of themselves, and they use their sense of themselves to get on top of others who are dumb herd people, unevolved, unindividuated herd consciousness. They can cleverly get on top of it, but they waste much energy trying to do it themselves without the ways of nature, harmony, to perpetuate. And that's the spiritualized state. That's the 3rd evolutionary state, where you are on a spiritual path and allowing the ways of nature to make your job easier so that you can work smarter, not harder, right? So this person is in the individuated evolutionary state, the middle one. And they've got Pluto in Leo in the 9th house. It's trine to Mars and Sagittarius in the 2nd house. Now, and as Jeffrey stated before in the book, an individual with Pluto in the 9th house will naturally ponder the metaphysical, cosmological, or philosophical questions concerning the nature of existence in an effort to understand him or herself in this context. Pluto in the 9th house is bound to have these Sagittarian, the struggle of hearing culture outside of you, and Sagittarius sorts of things. So the Pluto in the 9th ponders metaphysical, cosmological, philosophical questions concerning the nature of existence, and they want to understand themselves in this context. The soul, in this case, has desired this knowledge before, and will naturally desire to expand on this orientation coming into this present life. The evolutionary intent for this life is reflected in the 3rd house in Aquarius polarity, where Pluto is in the 9th in Leo. The evolutionary intent is reflected in the 3rd house in Aquarius, the opposite. This is what Pluto always does, is it's integrating its opposite. In this case, they are integrating and learning the relativity of philosophical, cosmological, metaphysical, or religious teachings. The experience of how they are not universally formal and set in stone. This is the 3rd house thing. What does it mean in this moment with this person and this person? The Gemini, understanding how each individual is the true essence of what all religion means. 3rd house, 9th house. In other words, the person in this case is learning that the personal version of the cosmological order, i.e. beliefs, and the way to realize the truth, the path of that order, is relative. That's the lesson they're learning here. There are many paths to the truth, and internal and external, philosophical and intellectual confrontations would lead to this lesson in this individual. They would promote a necessary objectivity. With Mars in the 2nd house, the individual would naturally manifest desires originating from the 9th house Pluto in Leo to be free in order to explore whatever experiences were necessary in order to learn about life because of these lessons. Through exposure to many different kinds of experiences, the individual could learn not only about larger metaphysical connections, but also the relativity of differing ideas or systems. With Mars in the 2nd house, the person would naturally desire to be relatively self-contained, self-sufficient, and self-contemplating. This individual may naturally desire to study nature, for example, and would contemplate natural laws as revealed in nature. In this way, the individual would understand him or herself in a cosmological and metaphysical way because of his or her relationship to nature and the natural laws therein. It's an interesting analysis there. The waxing trine between Mars and Pluto would suggest an ease of understanding this process in this case. It would suggest that the person would synthesize all experiences and thoughts into one belief system of his or her own design that would serve as the basis of his or her understanding about the nature of life. Continuing in this example, the Mars in the 2nd house would also reflect the desire to identify personal resources that can be used to sustain or support physical survival. With Pluto in Leo in the 9th house, A natural gift of teaching could be possible means of creatively actualizing the individual's own unique purpose and identity and destiny. This evolutionary capacity and desire would manifest itself through the second house Mars in Sagittarius as a desire to teach as a means of self-support, the second house thing, right? By developing the teaching capacity, the person would be naturally exposed to the ideas, philosophies, and opinions of others. It's the Pluto in that ninth vibe. This dynamic would naturally create the evolutionary desires for this life, to learn the relativity of belief systems, the different paths or approaches to truth, and to actualize the creative purpose or destiny by linking it to a socially relevant need. It's the Mars in this case. Expansion upon previous development and objectivity would occur as byproducts of this evolutionary direction and commitment. Negatively, that second house Mars would manifest a desire to withdraw again in order to not face the confrontations that threatened the emotional security of the ninth house Pluto and the deepest pre-existing beliefs, which again is what happens with Pluto in the ninth. The second house Mars would reflect the transmitted desire of the ninth house Pluto in this way. Interesting way to read these things. So that was the end of our example there. Now, all individuals with Pluto-Mars aspects have been and will be learning karmic and evolutionary lessons about the nature of their desires. Ultimately, we all face this lesson, but the need is emphasized by these aspects. Mars, an aspect to the south or north nodes, would also correlate this same lesson. So the key to working with the tremendous amount of raw energy and power inherent in the Mars-Pluto aspects is to direct it towards goals that are personally relevant to the individual. By channeling this energy and power, these individuals will be able to effect a consistency and continuity of action in their lives. By harnessing this power through linkage to relevant goals, they can create a dynamic for processing their energies. In other words, self-knowledge and understanding can occur through the activity that the commitment to a goal requires. It's by just burrowing deeply into whatever it is that you've decided to commit to that you learn self-knowledge about yourself and deep things, because, in the same way that Mars is affecting, Pluto is affecting Mars and it's enacting its pull on Mars. Mars is also Mars is acting as a channel for the self-realization which Pluto represents. It's adding energy, consciousness, awareness to the auric field of Pluto, acting as a channel for the self-realization that Pluto really deeply means, illumination. So, until a commitment to something is made, many people with Pluto and Mars aspects will follow one desire after another, each desire taking them to one experience after another. Dissipation of personal energy can occur in this instance. As a result, these individuals can experience a loss of perspective as to who they are and what they are doing, and for what reasons. All those with Mars-Pluto aspects have a deep-seated need to transform the limitations of personal reality and individual identity. To transform the limitations of personal reality and individual identity. To be breaking the limits of who they are, what they can consider themselves as, for better or worse. Personal energy must be channeled and linked to a relevant activity in order for this transformation and evolution to take place in a positive manner. Linked to a relevant activity. Water passing through the generators in a dam offers us an apt analogy. The dam channels water through portals. The water turns the generators, which produce tremendous quantities of electricity. In the same way, channeling energy will allow for personal transformation of pre-existing limitations, so that the Mars-Pluto individual is in a continual state of becoming at every moment in life. Gosh, I can relate to a lot of this. It's quite crazy. Commonly, excuse me. Commonly, these individuals will resent any restrictions or limitations placed upon them by external agents or conditions. They will also resent any restrictions or limitations that they find within themselves. And they'll resent it, which is part of the illness here. Not forgiving it. Not seeing it as, they'll see it as an enemy in themselves, and they won't sit down with it and make a deal with it. They'll just say, nope, this is fucked. And then they're ignoring critical parts of their underlying unconscious, which is a mess, really, if you let that get too far. So these individuals will occasionally resent any restrictions and limitations to them that they find within themselves. The desire and compelling drive to eliminate all limitations, right? It's Pluto, amplification, Mars, accomplishment, razor-sharp, penetrating willfulness, right? So there's a desire and compelling drive to eliminate all limitations. And this reflects the need to discover who they essentially are at a core level. It's really what's going on here. To experience what they are consciously and to get a positive grasp of it at a core level. The house locations of Mars and Pluto, plus their signs and aspects, will suggest or describe how this personal transformation will take place relative to the evolutionary intent and desires that these individuals have. The potential for inner conflict is enormous. As an example, let's say Pluto is in the 4th house in Cancer, and that Mars is in Libra in the 7th house. The two planets are in a waxing square. On one hand, this individual would desire to explore a variety of experiences through relationships that were formed on an instinctive basis. In so doing, the individual would progressively discover or realize ever new dimensions or aspects of him or herself. Now, with Pluto square Mars, many of these instinctive encounters with others could be of a sexual nature, or the individual would be tempted to sexualize them. On the other hand, Pluto in Cancer in the 4th house commonly needs familiarity, continuity, and a security that is linked to home or family environments. This is just giving more bread to this example here. Thus, the conflict or clash of desires would revolve around the individual's need to explore new situations and relationships, and the need to maintain the old and the familiar in order to feel secure, right? It's the Pluto in the 4th house in Cancer, and Mars is in Libra in the 7th house, and they're square to each other in this way. So commonly, this pattern would promote a strong-willed partner who instinctively and compulsively tried to control the emotional and individual definition of the Mars-Pluto person. Of course, this situation would promote inner rage and anger as the individual experienced his or her limitations and restrictions in this kind of situation. Yet, because of security needs, this individual may not act upon the conflicting desire and the need to break free from this limitation. In essence, this individual subconsciously desired this kind of partner in order to feel protected and cared for. This partner was also subconsciously drawn to enforce the individual's evolutionary conflict. At some point, this individual may erupt out of the relationship once the restriction and control reached a critical mass situation, as would almost inevitably occur at one point or another, because of the nature of the waxing square between Mars and Pluto. Waxing means two planets are in a waxing square. Oh, so it's not quite, let's say the Mars is in 15 degrees of Libra, and Pluto was in 17, 18 degrees of Cancer. That would mean that there's it's hard to visualize this, but what I actually mean is if Pluto was at, say, 10 degrees of Cancer, and Mars was at 15 degrees of Leo, that means it's bigger than 90 degrees, right? And so it's waxing. And that does change the nature of how Jeffrey Wolf Green defines these planetary combinations. So, at some point, with a waxing square like this, the individual erupts out of the relationship as control from the partner reaches the critical mass. The need for new forms or new ways of being in a relationship would only increase the evolutionary conflict and energy to shatter this limitation. The clash of wills between the two partners would aggravate the conflict to further compel the termination of this situation. Very interesting. So, when the lid finally blows, a metamorphosis will occur. The essence of this transformation will be the discovery or realization of the individual's own core and the ability to stand upon his or her own feet in a self-secure way. In addition, the individual would come to recognize the need for relative equality, Mars in Libra, within a relationship wherein the partner encouraged the freedom and independence to become what the individual must become in a self-determined way. He really goes deeply into these examples, doesn't he? In this way, this kind of relationship would allow for a channeling of personal desire and transformation versus running around and going through one partner after the other. So this relationship allows for a channeling of personal desire and transformation. So, if you're running around and going through one partner after another instead of facing that, this promotes an ultimate dissipation of energy and a loss of personal perspective. This situation would ultimately enforce the lesson or realization as to the nature or basis of the individual's desires and evolutionary needs, and how the interaction of the conflicting desires and needs created, shaped, or led to the conditions that are now their reality. It's the Mars and the Pluto seeing it from this interestingly separate vantage, seeing how your action has led to what you are. Now, in general, Mars-Pluto aspects promote a tremendous amount of sexual energy. The intense emotional power of Pluto is now linked to the physical nature of Mars. The buildup of emotional sexual energy must find a release. If it does not, then emotional distortions of all kinds can result. Very interesting. This dynamic has two possible extremes of expression. One, to be driven and controlled by the sexual desire nature. Or two, the other extreme, the yin to the yang, to be in control of the sexual desire nature. The stressful aspects tend to promote more extreme levels of emotional sexual energy than do the non-stressful aspects. As well, positive help towards Mars can also, positive aspects and help from other planets towards Mars, good dignity for Mars, as well as positive aspects to Pluto. These can all help in this situation. Now, the desire and need to exhaust or rejuvenate oneself through... So the desire here and the need with Pluto in aspect to Mars, with this sexual energy, is to exhaust or rejuvenate oneself through sexual experiences. It's climbing up or shaving down, shaving the karma off. Many will experience a personal transformation of limitations through emotional and sexual experiences. There is a compelling need for this kind of experience in this person. Emotional or sexual energy can take many directions within these individuals. The actual direction depends on the individual's overall values and belief systems. And the condition or placements of Mars and Pluto within the birth chart also have to do with it, with the direction. Some will transmute their sexual energy by focusing upon the fulfillment of a goal or ambition. By using and directing the emotional or sexual energy in this way, the individual becomes consumed by the ambition or goal itself, through which a transformation or personal limitations can occur. Inevitably, because you're only you. You're bound by the limits of what you are, especially when your Pluto's involved. You could you could willfully apply something to smithereens and to dust. But you will learn how much easier it would be if you would work smarter, not harder, and work in proper cohesion with nature, truth, and other people. But that's a very frustrating reality to deal with if it means that you feel the personal limitation of not being able to do it all yourself or to do it your way. So, a couple that the author once counseled offer an interesting example of this transmutation process. So now the man was a rock musician. The woman's complaint was that he did not make love to her enough. The man had Mars in Scorpio in the 8th house, square to Pluto in Leo in the 5th house. The man would frequently play the guitar for hours on end. In effect, he was transmitting his sexual or emotional energy through the guitar. He was making love to it, essentially. Because of the fixed nature of this aspect pattern, he was unable to change his focus. I can definitely relate to this very deeply. I'm a musician myself. Kind of crazy. But because of the fixed nature of this aspect pattern, he was unable to change his focus. In the end, the woman started having affairs to meet her own legitimate needs. This produced emotional shocks for the man, because he had been pissing away his sexual energy and assuming and feeling like it was still there with the woman. And therefore, rage, anger, and violence followed. He physically assaulted his wife and her lover. So he physically assaulted his wife and her new lover. He was arrested and jailed, and the woman trotted off with another man. This emotional shock produced the necessary confrontation that made him examine where he was coming from and for what reasons. What am I really doing with any of this? His compelling desire for recognition, fame, and adulation with respect to his musical career, transmitted through the 8th house Mars in Scorpio, translated into his love affair with his guitar. The guitar symbolized the goal and means through which he could realize his 5th house Plutonian desires. That recreational sexual enjoyment energy. Others with Mars-Pluto aspects will compulsively need sexual release through relationships. The need and desire is to unite one's energies with other sources of power so that a transformation of personal limitations can take place. Naturally, then, these individuals desire to be sexually united and consumed through or with others. The quality of sexual expression is intense. When partners are not available, however, the pressure of the emotional sexual energy can also translate into compulsive, yet necessary at whatever level, masturbatory activity. The sexual expression is intense in these individuals because of the subconscious desire to penetrate and transform the limitations of themselves and others. These individuals have a need to penetrate and to be penetrated. You can take that with however many grains of salt you wish. Some will use sexuality as a form of control or manipulation in relationships when they're emotionally wounded. For others, the bottom line of their lives will revolve around their sexuality. They will be consumed and driven by it. Most will experience instinctive and hypnotic sexual attractions to others. Some of these attractions may turn into obsessions. Some individuals will claim the right and freedom to pursue these attractions. Others will attempt to control the attractions by not following them or not acknowledging them. Many Mars-Pluto individuals will need to reject and rebel against sexual taboos as dictated by societal or familial environments. To be honest with you, I'm definitely one of these people. I relate to all of this completely. As I said, I've got my Sun, Mars, and Pluto all conjunct around 16 to 20 degrees in the sign of Scorpio. Some people with Pluto-Mars aspects will explore or desire to experience many secret or forbidden forms of sexual experience. The power of sexual energy and the desire for self-discovery through this kind of experience can hypnotically attract these types of people. Some with this aspect have experienced very painful and difficult emotional or sexual experiences in prior lives. Some have experienced rape or have been the rapist at some point in the past. Others have suffered physical and emotional violence, or have been the violent one. When these conditions are indicated in the birth chart, or through the actual experience of the client, then the cause for these conditions will always be found within the individual's own prior life background, or through causes that have been put into motion in this life. Most commonly, these individuals have misused their emotional or sexual expression and energy in the past. This could have occurred through using their sexuality to get what they wanted from someone, or through emotionally manipulating a situation. In some cases, they have struggled with conflicts over commitment to a partner versus the desire to be free to be involved with whomever they wanted. This collision of desire can also be the basis of physical and emotional violence when one partner has felt used, manipulated, or abused. Other Mars-Pluto individuals have drawn to themselves partners who have had this problem of conflicting desires. In this case, that type of partner is only reflecting the overt or covert conflict inherent in the individual. The point is that some of these individuals have difficult sexual or emotional karma that is built up over time. The effect of sexual and emotional confrontations is to induce the awareness and knowledge of why these experiences are occurring. The answer is always found in the individual's own desires and prior activity based on those desires. A few individuals have created an evolutionary situation wherein they have learned to deny or suppress their sexuality and their needs. I've been in this camp before. The fear of vulnerability, of being possessed or controlled by another, is the cause. Yep, that's quite correct. Such people will attempt to transmute the energy toward the fulfillment of a goal or ambition, or they may masturbate as the intense buildup of energy demands a release. In general, Mars-Pluto individuals have the capacity for total self-transformation or total self-destruction. Of course, these two archetypal dynamics can cyclically alternate throughout life. Negatively expressed, the Mars component can become intoxicated by its own egocentric and individual power as a transmitted reflection of the separating desire of the soul, Pluto. In varying ways, the individual refuses to acknowledge that anything or anyone is more powerful than him or herself. In this reaction, the individual refuses to accept any limitation. The attitude is commonly, I will do whatever I damn well please, and I don't care what the consequences may be. Such an individual can be amazingly ruthless and willful in obtaining or actualizing whatever needs or desires they have, for better or worse. The individual will challenge anyone who attempts to control or exert power over him or her, or anyone who threatens the right to do whatever he or she pleases. Underneath it all, the individual deeply senses the errors being made. At some point, the evolutionary desire emanating from the soul, At some point, the evolutionary desire emanating from the soul to transform and correct the situation will manifest itself as undermining types of activities. In other words, the person will subconsciously set up situations or circumstances that will backfire. This effect will enforce emotional shocks, feelings of disappointment in oneself, and the emotional shocks will induce an inner soul searching that can lead to a metamorphosis of this type of behavior and personal identity. Now, for those who align themselves on a path of personal transformation, the rapidity of personal growth is rarely fast enough for them. So this is the level of evolutionary awareness where they've gone past the individuated self and they're starting to see what is the pattern in nature which I can fit myself into in order to make my nature come through and for me to have in my conscious mind less resistance to what that nature is trying to be. Those who align themselves on this kind of personal transformation, they'll find that the rapidity of their personal growth it's rarely fast enough for them. I want more, faster, better, spirituality, more pure. Compared to the growth of others, it is actually amazingly quick, but not quick enough from the individual's own point of view. Impatience, anger, and rage are not uncommon reactions as these individuals encounter one limitation, one obstacle, one old compulsion or habit pattern after another. It can actually be very frustrating, and again, this is one that I deeply relate to. I used to have anger problems in my own little way. So on the one hand, they will desire to purge themselves of these limitations. And on the other hand, they can become extremely angry at the obstacles themselves and resent having to deal with them. This apparent paradox reflects the coexisting desires of the soul. In addition, these types can be impatient at the growth rates of other people, especially those close to them. These behavioral dynamics can be intensified or mellowed depending on the overall nature of the individual and the specific aspect from Mars to Pluto with respect to the houses and signs they occupy. So, all in all, the greatest challenge in Mars-Pluto aspects is to align the personal will with a higher will or purpose. Any resistance to this ultimate evolutionary need is based on the separating desires originating from Pluto that are transmitted to the egocentric structure of Mars. This resistance is based on fears of losing control, of being possessed, or consumed by forces greater than the individual, and the sense of powerlessness that these fears induce. Once this resistance is eliminated, the individual's actions and desires will be in conformity to a higher will. Once this attunement to a higher will is realized, the individual can progress, attain, and actualize his or her own purpose, desires, and ambitions more quickly and effortlessly than others do. It's a very powerful thing to be on that kind of a fast track with your own consciousness, with the nature of your own soul evolution. It's a really great place to be. Pluto and Mars is definitely an interesting aspect. It's definitely one that represents some kind of purgation in this life that's going to have to be pushed through long endurance and willfulness applied to some constructive goal or set of goals. I love the way Jeffrey Wolf Green puts it in this book, and I hope you guys did too. That was Pluto in aspect to Mars, natally in the birth chart. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. My name is Dustin Cormier. This is How to Rock Astrology. This has been Pluto in aspect to Mars. Quite a long video. I knew it would be. Let me know if you dug it. Let me know in the comments if it was a lot of fun for you. And keep your eyes peeled because we always got more stuff coming out on my channel. For now, I'm tired. I'm going to go smoke a little bit of cannabis, and I'm going to have a nice, delicious sleep. Thanks so much for watching, folks, and I'll see you guys in the next one.